Greetings, YouTube. I want to start off this video by saying that, personally, as somebody who's not part of the content creator program, I can't accurately make a judgment call personally on how somebody's buff is going to be until I get my hands on them in the game. That's not going to happen until the first week of December for Hawkeye. So, for all I know, he's going to be amazing, right? He could still be, because there's some people who are so hyped that they're doing what I did as a mistake with my guillotine. Wish I had those rank up materials back, and taking Hawkeye to rank 2 or even rank 3 or rank 5 as a 5-star before he is officially being buffed in the game. That will release with the patch for the month of December. But Kalana123 has written a post that has, let's just say, been a passionate debate. It's a very, very long post, and so I may or may not read the whole thing, but there are comments on both sides that have come out in either support of his ideas or in vehement opposition. All I know is that what he's focusing on most is his disappointment about Hawkeye's main utility, the power control and power drain utility, being nerfed. Alright, let's get into it. Kabam has released a spotlight of the Hawkeye buff. If you haven't seen it, check it out here. Before we get to the critical part of this discussion, I wish to repeat the developers did a good job with Hawkeye. I wouldn't call it a nerf overall, like we had with Guillotine or the Hood. That would be dishonest and disrespectful for the work that has been done by Kabam. So, I mean, he's given them flowers and credit to start off. By now, it should be a golden rule: do not fix or change what isn't broken. If for some reason the changes that have to be made to the champion are overpowered within the new kit, tune down those changes before touching the old kit. If they can't do anything else, this change should be motivated extensively so we can understand why it was done. Kabam violated the golden rule again. They did it with Guillotine's healing in Special 3, and they did it with the Hood's Fate Seal. The nerf of Hawkeye's power control. Pre-buff Hawkeye has one very good thing: a powerful, consistent, reliable power drain of 40% of max power with the Special 1. This is the equivalent of 120% of a bar of power. He was a one-trick kind of guy, but the player base enjoyed it because of it. Let me repeat: powerful, consistent, reliable. And I'll say this, though, and maybe I'm just not talking to the right people, but even though most people know that Hawkeye has that, they're still not bringing him in. They're still not taking him in over the other champions, even of his class. Now, maybe there is specific fights 1 or 2 times a year, similar to non-Hawkeye Ronin, where you can spam that Special 1, and he's like a beyond god tier counter. But for everyday questing, I just don't know anybody does. Maybe, again, I'm just not talking to the right people, but I don't know. Post-buff Hawkeye power drains for only 75% of 1 bar of power with the Special 1, a reduction of 45% of a bar of power, or in relative terms, 37.5% less power drain. In a fight, that stacks a lot. If pre-buff Hawkeye would have used 5 Special 1s, he would have drained 600% of a bar of power, or the equivalent of 6 Special 1, 3 Special 2, or 2 Special 3. Post-buff Hawkeye will have drained 375% of a bar of power, or 225% of a bar of power less. That's 2 extra Special 1s or 1 extra Special 2 you have to bait and dex more than before. I will say this: I have not checked that math, but I'm always amazed by the community's passion for these kind of things, and the fact that he's doing this math in this post is pretty impressive to me. As gods, Kabam gives and takes away. With the perfect release, there is a 100% chance to inflict a suppression debuff, reducing the opponent's combat power rate by 50% for 8 seconds. How to get that perfect release? During special attacks, press the block after the first input to slow down time. Releasing the block input precisely when Hawkeye releases, the arrow grants this perfect release bonus. As Hawkeye hasn't been released yet, we don't know what this perfect release thing looks like. But we do know one thing: a powerful, consistent, reliable power drain has been replaced by a less powerful, but same consistent, reliable power drain, and a less powerful, less consistent, less reliable suppression debuff. A debuff that can be shrugged off, can fail due to an immunity, and requires you to attack the opponent giving it power, but to a lesser degree. A debuff that won't even be inflicted if you fail to do a perfect release. In any matchup that power drain matters, Hyperion, Power Focus, Energize, you'll notice that post-buff Hawkeye performs worse than pre-buff Hawkeye. Also, the synergy with Hercules changes as it requires passing the threshold of a bar of power to gain a Fury buff. It is more difficult to do with post-buff Hawkeye than pre-buff Hawkeye. In my personal opinion, the balance of this change is tipping over towards a nerf rather than a buff. So it's interesting because at the beginning of the post he said, I don't think Hawkeye got a nerf, but then at this post he feels like he's leaning toward more of a nerf than a buff emotions. And then he's got ambiguous bleeds, changes in bleed. Again, I'm not going to read the whole post because we're already getting past the normal amount. So I'm going to scroll down and say, this is a clear nerf, right? Things are more complicated. Basic attacks pause all bleed debuffs on the opponent for 1 second. So while being aggressive, you can prolong the bleed debuffs as 1 second equals to 2 ticks. It can easily be calculated how long the bleed debuffs be paused to have the same potency as pre-buff. Now, I'll say this. I feel like this kind of thing just seems so complicated on paper that, one, it's going to be a lot more simple and easy to do once you're actually using the champ and getting the timing down. But two, I think it's really hard to say whether or not this part of the buff in his utility is going to be a nerf or not. Just reading raw data, right? Okay, activating perfect release bonus grants a dialed-in passive, increasing duration of debuffs inflicted by special attacks by 10%. All dialed-in stacks are removed when failing to activate perfect release bonus. So with max stack of dialed-in, the special one can increase the base bleed duration from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. With max deep wounds, the base bleed duration is 12.5 seconds, and this increases to 18.75 seconds. The gap between pre-buff and post-buff shrinks to 4,287.89 bleed damage, or equal to 36.2 extra ticks. Let me remind you, you need to activate 5 perfect releases to get 5 dialed-in passives, which amounts to 5 special attacks with at least 5 bars of power. There's a lot of 5s in that sentence, right? But we're not done yet. A perfect release also makes the arrow attack become a critical or guaranteed critical hit. The signature ability makes landing a critical hit with an arrow shot will cause any personal bleed debuff triggered to become a critical bleed, multiplying the bleed's potency by Hawkeye's critical damage multiplier. Again, so much. We're going to skip 3 paragraphs down to the special one spam doesn't work. Pre-buff Hawkeye was only good if you spam special one. Is this as good as post-buff as pre-buff? That's a difficult to answer question. I'm not going to state that you will definitely lose bleed damage, but I will argue that it won't be as easily as just launching the special one, thanks to the perfect release mechanic and the different effects and bonuses it gives. The power drain is significantly reduced in its effectiveness, so the special one spam won't be as good as before, which tells me that he feels like maybe there won't be as much motivation to spam the special one in general, which does change the original and traditional utility of Hawkeye. Much depends if the bleeds the special one can stack. If so, doing 5 special ones in a row gives 5 bleed debuffs, which can be easily paused by basic attacks. That would be pretty good, and in that case, the bleed damage is superior to pre-buff Hawkeye if they don't stack well. To conclude, while the Hawkeye buff is certainly one of the better buffs of the last few months, the clear nerf and power control gives a sour taste in the mouth. And by the mouth, he means his mouth. It seems Kabam is still tone deaf to the pleas of the community to not nerf or devalue existing strengths of champions. Now, again, as I said at the beginning, this is not something that is shared by everybody. You can see Finico's the first comment. I'm impressed how people can write whole books about champs they don't even see 1 second of gameplay yet. And then the counter did the same thing with Guillotine, and he was right. Just requires reading the ability list and a calculator, not really rocket science. So again, we're getting to some conflict. All I know is that part of this is just having more fun with the champion. And I think Kabam's design to have that perfect timing was to make it maybe more interactive. I do think when you have to have perfect timing, it's the same thing with dexing or parry when the game's broken. If you have a dropped input, you're not going to get the tap every time, and so you're not even going to be able to know if it's good or not if you think you've got the perfect timing, but you're on a device that's not working. So it is kind of an inconvenient time to invent a champion with a tap mechanic, but at the same time, who knows? Maybe everybody will love him, and this video will not age well. But this summoner seems pretty confident in the math that he's done. I wanted to keep this video under 10 minutes. I'm looking down already at 9:20, so let's end it here. I will say to the summoner who wrote this, thank you for putting the work in, because it took a lot of time to write this, and I think you lay out your points really well, even if several people disagree. Hey, we're a community. We're a marketplace of ideas. It's okay to disagree, right? Thanks for watching. Have a good one. And Callinot123, if you want to say anything more about this, or if you want to give a post-December patch analysis, hit me up.